All right, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to Barker's Found Movie Night, and we are so fortunate to have a wonderful panel from the film as well from our DC community here to join us. I'm Missy Herendeen, one of the therapists here at Barker Adoption Foundation, and I am so excited to introduce Mara
Mignona.
Yeah. I should know that. Mara Mignona and May Kipnis. They are two adoptees with us. They're going to introduce themselves as well as our panel and have a wonderful conversation around our film that we just watched together and the search process. So we thank you again for joining us. Mara and May, feel free to take it away for us.
Great. I'm happy to start with introductions. My name is Mara. I was adopted in 1998 from Dambai, which is in Guangdong province. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with my mom, who's a single mom, and my younger sister, who is adopted from Guatemala. But currently I live in Washington, D.C., and I work for George Washington University planning fundraising events. And I actually started my birth parent search earlier this year by hiring a searcher. So I'm looking forward to chatting with all of you tonight, and thanks for being here. May.
Hi, I'm May. I was adopted from Jiangxi province in 2001, and I grew up in Chicago with my parents. And I'm currently, it's funny because I'm also at the George Washington University, but I'm doing my undergrad in Chinese. And it's so nice to see all of you.
I can just go next. My name is Anita Guo. I'm one of the producers of the film Found. We're so honored to be here. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch the film and have this conversation with us.
I'm Amanda Lippitz. I'm the director and producer, co-producer of Found with my wonderful partner Anita. I'm also the proud aunt of Chloe in the film. Thank you for having us.
My name's Lily. I was in the film, and let me see, I haven't done this. I was adopted from Huazhou at 13 months, and I just graduated with my accounting degree from Oklahoma State.
So, hi, my name is Wei Han. I'm the founder and CEO of My China Roots. So Liu Hao, who you've all seen in the documentary, is my colleague. And I started My China Roots about 12 years ago as an extension of my own roots search. I was born and raised in Holland. My parents are from Indonesia. I was not adopted, but my family migrated 6 generations ago from China, then Indonesia, then Holland. So that's how My China Roots then started 12 years ago. Great to be with you.
All right, thank you guys so much. Like I said, Mara and May are going to lead us with some questions and conversation, and I think we are all just in for such a lovely evening. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna start off with Lily asking you a question about home and like what does home mean to you, and did going back to China complicate that, change it, did it stay the same, just general thoughts?
So I think home for me is based off of the people that you surround yourself with and also your family. And I think going to China, that definition of home definitely became more clear with Chloe and Sadie around, and even like Liu Hao, because I mean, obviously they're biological, but we like really connected whenever we were in China. And I thought also being able to experience our hometowns and our provinces and like being a part of the culture was really special. So I would definitely say home is, I guess, where like the people you love and surround yourself with is.
I wonder if anyone else, oh, sorry, go ahead, May.
No, you go.
I'm just wondering if anyone else on the call has anything else to add about their thoughts about home. I know, Hoi-Han, you were saying you grew up in Holland and you have a background traveling around. So if anyone else wants to jump in about home.
Oh, we can talk so long about this. But home to me, yeah, I think it starts with people. The people of course, we love friends and family. But then I think secondarily, yeah, often I've been living in China for 18 years, born and raised in Holland. Every summer we used to go to Indonesia. So I am comfortable knowing and feeling that I have home. An element of home is in all those countries, those three countries. And it's also related, outside of people, it's also related to things we used to do, games we used to play as a kid, families that we have in different places, food we used to eat, music we used to listen to different places. So it's outside of the people. It's just that slightly wider layer of everything that you did with those people, and it's the memories and the visuals and the everything that came with it that feels like home to me. And I have different points depending on what I do at any moment of the day when I feel nostalgic about what element that I then like to go back to in my mind that makes me feel more like home and I guess at ease with myself.
I guess jumping more into the film side of things, I know, Amanda, you have to hop off, so we'd love to talk about the film a little bit. I know you have a personal connection to the film with Chloe, but I'm wondering if both you and Anita can kind of talk about what inspired you or drew you to really jumpstart the process of making this documentary.
Well, again, thank you guys for having us. We, this wasn't the emotion. This is a very emotional film. So when you make it, you get to those like hard moments. You're always like, what are we here for? And why are we doing this? And to hear that it touched someone and to have the embrace of the adoption community really is why we all did it and kind of took that great leap. And so for me, my brother told me that they were adopting a little girl from China, and it was just the most exciting thing that had happened in our family. And I just remember the very first time I met her, she'd just been home a week, and she was beyond adorable and so happy and loving. And I thought, somewhere in this world is her family, and they can't imagine, this life that she's going to live. And it's so, unfortunate that they'll never be able to find each other, because at that time it was a very different world, and the technology didn't exist, the connectivity didn't exist, the social media didn't exist, and also, it was a different time in terms of like, people in China feeling comfortable coming forward and talking about what was going on. So there was kind of this feeling of like hopelessness, like she'll never know. And when my brother told me that they had found a cousin on 23andMe, which had started as like a medical fact-finding mission, and that she was around her age, and it was the first time Chloe really lit up with any interest in looking at her past. And as an aunt and an artist, I was inspired. And then when my brother told me he was having her bat mitzvah at the wall in Jerusalem, just the image of Chloe surrounded by our big Jewish family and everything that had to happen for that moment to happen, all the aunties, all the adoption community, everyone that came together for her to land at this moment, becoming a woman in the Jewish community in Israel, I just asked my brother if I could film.
And I was lucky in that when I first met Amanda had already, been following Chloe, and then through getting to know Sadie and Lily, sort of collecting a lot of just footage of just their daily lives, and sort of getting into the topic of what it might be like for them to embark on a journey to China together. And around that time, I had just come back from China, making a film there, and the idea of sort of cross-cultural identity and coming of age, like those are themes that are pretty prevalent in a lot of my work, very organically, just from being who I am and the way I grew up. So when I met Amanda and she told me about this beautiful story that she just told you guys as well, it was sort of like the spark that went off that kind of ultimately felt like a no-brainer. And it's really nice when something like that comes along and you just like, everything in my gut tells me I have to help this group of people tell this story. And thankfully we were able to pull together this team of amazing collaborators to help us do that. And I think at the time too was a really interesting inflection point, and I think sort of in terms of everybody starting to talk about Asian American identity in a way that they haven't been able to articulate as much before in popular media. And I certainly have been thinking about how there was so many more ways we can define what that meant and showcase what that meant. And so I just became, really enamored with Lily, Chloe, and Sadie's story, and felt like that was just yet another beautiful way to really represent that experience. And it's so specific but also so relatable for folks who have been through similar experiences and been also maybe not as well. And so it just kind of all came together really nicely, and I think we were lucky to build a really nice little film family out of the making of the film as well.
And going to like jump off something you said about recently people talking about Asian identity more in media and everything. What do you guys think about the identity of Chinese adoptees being different maybe than adoptees of other Asian nationalities just because of the anti-China sentiment in the US? Like, does that complicate identity? Is there anything you guys think about that?
Not to put you on the spot, Lily, but
I know, I was like,
to hear what
Lily, you have
Lily
to answer
thinks.
that. You have so many good, you have
That's-
so many stories.
That's one of the things I think that really stuck out to me was whenever during the film we went to my village, and I never thought about this, but a lot of the people that were there, they would look at me, Chloe and Sadie, and they knew that like they instantly picked out that like I was the one from that village based off of like the shape of like my face and like my facial features. And I like never thought about that, like the different aspects between us and like where, or I guess how it relates to our province, which I thought was super interesting. But I never thought of it as like a bad thing where it's like different, because I think self-identity is already super hard, especially I think being adopted, because it's really tough to find out who you are, and like having, I guess, when you're a baby, like that transition. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. We were curious, with the filmmaking process, did you ever feel like there were moments that, felt invasive or too inappropriate to be filming in terms of privacy, or just, experiencing the moment that you were in?
I definitely feel like there were times when there was some moments where it was, I don't know if it was an invasion of privacy, because I think also the other thing is I really do like to stick to my word, and I signed up to do this, and like I knew what I had to do, like I knew that I was going to be filmed. And I think just the only thing that really would upset me, because it just caught me by surprise, was the roller coaster of emotions I had. And especially whenever we went to China, that was a lot, and I really thought I could handle it like a pro. And then I got there and I was like totally like, I also cry so easily. So I was like crying a lot, and it was a lot. And there were definitely times where I like was like, oh, I don't feel like being filmed, and this is just, I just like didn't, I like couldn't even like figure out what was happening around me, because I think also so there were times where I was in culture shock and I just didn't know how to feel or how to communicate it. But one of the things that really helped was having Chloe and Sadie there, because they're like obviously they're adopted, and like they knew exactly what I was feeling, and we could just easily communicate with each other on and off camera.
I totally understand what you're saying from the emotion side. I have never been to China, and I was living vicariously through you. The film made me so emotional. And I guess going back to something you said, Amanda, it really touched me, and it kind of sparked my journey to start my search as well. So yeah, I can see how it could have definitely been emotional as it was happening. Anita and Amanda, did you feel at times there were any times it was inappropriate to be filming or anything of that nature?
I mean, Anita can tell you many times I called her and was like, we can't do this anymore, you know, like, because the girls' like emotional well-being was always the most important thing. And making sure that they were doing what they wanted to do and they didn't feel pressure to find birth parents or not, whatever their journey was, we wanted them to go through it. I mean, I can tell you the night that Lily spoke to Leo Howe and heard that there may have these were some potential parents, as hard as it was for you all to watch it, and for, I mean, and of course, Lily, your experience was completely the one that we were all, you know, that is the hardest one, but to be there was extremely difficult. And Lily, I was like, we're done. And Lily's like, I'm done. I can't film. I'm like, we're done too. We're leaving. We love you. Like, go take a shower. And we kind of turned the cameras off and we just sat together. But it was I think a moment that's helped, you know, thousands of people who've seen the film. And that's where that like kind of like, okay, I'm here for a reason, like that moment kind of comes in. I mean, it's still it's very hard to watch and talk about even, but we were always checking in with the girls. We were in deep, open and honest conversations with the parents constantly, and also speaking with social workers. I had 2 adoption social workers that I consulted throughout the film. So, you know, you just have to put the girls first, and that's the North Star.
Yeah, and I think also, just as Amanda mentioned, it was it made it a little bit easier to have the whole family with us of every girl, and that the journey was taken together with everybody so that it was a shared experience. And at the end of the day, you know, we really rely on the girls and their courage to guide us, and also Leo Howe as well, who was just like such a blessing when we found her. We, you know, no pun intended, but you know, it was just one of those like surprises from the filmmaking gods of like, okay, this is who we thought was maybe just somebody who was going to help, you know, organize the China, you know, trip with us, and has experience obviously work, you know, in the organization, but she just turned out to be, you know, so much more, and really formed a special relationship with the girls. So, you know, I think we just took caution wherever we could, but also like recognize that everybody was doing this out of their own courage, and that there were times that was going to be really scary and tough, but then I think we try to have fun along the way as well.
I think we definitely did. And I think one of the things that like I love that Anita said earlier is we had like our own like documentary like family. And like I think when it was like really hard, like I think when I went to like go to like my village, it was like the end of the day. I don't know his last name, like Anita, maybe you know, but like Chen, like he worked with us and he was amazing. Like I loved him. I still love him to this day. And it was like so nice because he came up to me after and he was like, we kind of called him like Grandpa Chen because he was like older, I guess. And he was like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I was like, just like tough day filming and stuff like that. And then he was like, well, like, I'm always here if you need to talk, and like really care about you. And it meant so much to me that like everyone was like there for us.
I know most people who go back to search for the families don't have a documentary team documenting their journey.
They don't?
But for those who go back without like a bigger team, you know, what advice do you guys have for like dealing with those emotions if you don't have this like, you know, social workers with you and all these people to like help? Like, are there things that, you know, you think people should know about before doing it, just emotionally to prepare?
Well, we always make a big point out of preparation and having a support team. So essentially, it is the same. So there might not be cameras and the team might not be as big, but the emotional support and just imagining and thinking things through before you travel, and even before the travel, before the research, like just thinking through what it might mean and what type of answers might come up, because a lot of the answers that might come up might not always be pleasant. And really taking your time and being ready, and have that support structure at home. And that could be with peers, with fellow adoptees, of course, with the adoptive family, with just online, offline, and also just talking to people in China about what you might be able to expect. That preparation time is absolutely crucial. Yeah.
I could not agree more. I really do agree on that. And also I think I like was going to therapy. I think therapy is great, like self-care, like total like mental health. Like I love it. And I feel like it's so important to have like an open mindset and like just because I think whenever we all got back, we all went to a therapist. I think because it was really obviously hard. So I always feel like having a therapist and someone that you, because I like love my therapist and like we get along really well and I trust her with my life, is having a therapist there. And then also I feel like I didn't do this when I was in China, but like with all, because I honestly, whenever I was on the plane, I was like, oh, I got this. Like I was like, this is gonna be so easy. Like I have a therapist. Like I'm so in touch with my emotions. I was like, I'll be totally fine. I have Chloe and Sadie with me. I was like, I'll be fine. But then I obviously was not. I like my emotions were in whack. So I feel like if I just went with like me and my mom and I wanted somebody to talk to, I feel like I would have like journaled about it. That sounds very therapist, but I feel like writing about your emotions would, especially if you're going to be there for a long time, it would be like a really great like outlet.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I want to go back and touch on something that Hui-Han said about kind of getting discouraged and maybe something you might find something in the search that you don't want to find out, or I mean a lot of people also say that it's really impossible to search in China, or maybe you'll make contact with birth family and they won't want to be in touch with you. I guess kind of what words of wisdom or encouragement do you have for families who might want to search, but it kind of feels like an impossible undertaking?
So it is very hard, and it very often does feel like searching for a needle in a haystack. And the success rates, if success is a multi-layered, complex notion in general. But if you just for a moment, success in terms of finding birth parents is just low. It's depending on the database and the company or institution that helps you. It's typically between 5 and 12% or so in terms of success rate of finding birth parents. And but then yes, so realizing that's the first step, just realizing that there are a lot of different scenarios that you might end up with, and thinking those through is one. But then sorry, your question was basically how to prepare for possible like negative reactions from a finding, right?
Yeah, or I guess what would you say to families who kind of feel like they shouldn't even start the search process because there's no hope?
Okay, so I wouldn't say, don't start a search process if you're not ready or if you have doubts, but don't not start a search process because you think it might not lead anywhere. So if you are ready, if you are willing to take that leap, if you are willing to go on that journey, then definitely I would say give it a shot. And of course, financial considerations come into play always, but there are always also ways to start more slowly with a certain, like step by step. I mean, and for instance, you can first start by uploading most people have most adoptees have already taken a 23andMe or Ancestry DNA test. So one sort of low threshold action item would be just to upload those on the Chinese database and see if there are matches. Not necessarily to find your birth parents directly, but maybe, in the best case, there would be a third or maybe even second cousin that would be related to you. So that's sort of a low threshold. You can take things step by step and then see how you feel as you go. And the journey always just makes you evolve and develop your psychological and mental experience. So yeah, I would say take things step by step. And even though the eventual, the overall chances of finding birth parents are quite small, there are so many other elements of like success, if you want to use that word. We've had quite a lot of adoptees whose birth parents we did not end up finding, but we did, for instance, found foster parents or nurses, and they came out just being, well, really feeling that it was a successful search because they were more connected. They felt more connected with the very early stages of their lives back in China. And yeah, so there are just so many different scenarios possible and different definitions of success, and it's just important to think through them and to be prepared. But yeah, there's don't not start a search just because you think it's not possible.
So we've talked about the importance of having, like, knowing you're ready to search and having a support group, or like not support, but like a support system. So for people in that support system, what can they do, especially like adoptive parents do, to like be supportive, but also not center the conversation around them? A lot of times what happens, adoption, becomes about the adoptive parents. So like, how can they be supportive, but also know when to like take a step back?
I mean, I have 3 kids, and watching the parents in Found navigate this over 4 years, we worked with them, was some of the most inspirational parenting I've ever seen, because they really did give their young girls space and young women space to navigate how they felt safe, and they just created this like giant cushion of like, I'm here when you need me, but I also know when you got to do things on your own. And I think we saw that just really on display in China, when the parents knew when it was time for like Sadie, Lily, and Leo how to go, and Chloe to go do it alone and be on their own, and when they needed to be next to them, when they needed them there. So I think the thing that I just saw is letting your children navigate it and never pushing them to kind of push your own agenda onto it. And just on the part about like Hilhan, about like low threshold, kind of starting small. I remember the first time Lily and Sadie ever spoke, which you see on camera, we hung up and Lily's like, that's the first time I've ever spoken to a blood relative in my life. And here she is surrounded by this incredibly big family and all these cousins. And yet this was the first blood relative. And I don't think it really matters. As long as you have some DNA connection to that person, it means the world to someone who has never had that before.
Absolutely. I can't imagine what that felt like to first see the match in 23andMe and then to actually be able to facilitate that connection and have the relationship with Chloe and Sadie. So I'm sure that was absolutely amazing. Lily, I have a question for you in terms of kind of how you felt in terms of starting the search process with your relationship with your mom. I know that making the decision to start to search for your birth family is a really emotional step. And I know that in the documentary, you said your mom is your rock and you don't want your mom to feel like you don't love her just because you're searching for your family. And I kind of felt the same way with my mom. She's a single mom and we had a very close relationship. So I'm wondering kind of if you felt hesitant at all or how you navigated those emotions in starting your search journey.
I think what really helped is that like my mom, even like when I was like little, she always was like, like very supportive. Like whenever you want to do it, like you can do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. It was like there was never like I guess like a guidance under a film in a sense. Like my mom was just like, you need to do what's best for you. And I think I just was, which I don't regret it at all. It was just this is probably the best chance I'll get. And it was kind of I don't really like living in regret. So I feel like if like for me later, I would have been like wanting to do it or like kind of like a what if. So I think I just kind of went into it super open-minded. And I think it also just helps because my mom like was super supportive and like there for me. She never pushed me or anything. And she really let me like come to her. And she also just like listened, which was really great.
I guess like I feel like my parents were really supportive too with the adoption stuff because we were able to find my foster family, which is great. My mom facilitated all of that. It's amazing. I guess I've heard a lot of stories about some adoptees not having great supportive parents in that sense, but who later in life, when they became adults, like wanted to search. And kind of what Mara was saying about like not wanting to make the parents feel like they were their parents, or but also wanting it for themselves. What does like, and do you have any advice for people in that situation where like the relationship with their adopted family might not be as strong?
Okay, wait, sorry, you kind of glitched. Wait, what was the question?
No, sorry. I guess I don't know. I've heard a lot of stories of adoptees who don't have that really strong relationship with their adopted parents, and their adopted parents aren't as supportive of them searching, but the adoptee themselves want to search. I guess if any of you have like any experience or any advice navigating that, because I feel like that makes it even more complicated.
Yeah, I think that really would be tough. And I think this is also just like depending on like your lifestyle and like how you grew up. But I was lucky enough I went to China camp when I was younger. So it was really like great to be able to meet other people who were adopted and kind of experience that. And I always had them to talk to, which was super great. Um, but I think that just like depends on like the person and like their lifestyle. And I know that like a lot of the adoptees that I know, they would like still keep in touch with their travel group. I don't keep in touch with my travel group as much as some people do, but I think everyone has a travel group. I'm assuming that's correct. And so I feel like if depending on like the comfortability like with your parents and asking them, you could always be um like I guess asking about your travel group and like where they are and if you could contact them, then like that would be another way of having a sense of support. And I think also in like finding a really good group of friends. I mean, my friends aren't adopted, but one of my really good friends, Shayna, she always like really helped me and like knew what to say, which in a sense where like it wouldn't offend me. It was just a very comforting thing. So I guess that's another way of support. But and I think also in a sense you could not like teach your parents, but in a sense kind of guide them as to your comfortability on things.
Yeah, and just to add, although I'm not an adoptee myself, but in the making of the film and also subsequently when the film came out, and I mean, look at, the conversation where we are now, there's been so many incredible organizations that have either reached out to us or we've been able to work with that sort of, it feels like they really can provide really great functions in this space where, it's a community that they've built around adoptees with similar kind of questions and experiences. And I think, it like Lily said, it's really up to the individual to see what works for them. But um, if it can be accessed at home, I think there's maybe hope in some of these really great organizations and providing that safe space, and maybe having the courage to reach out to them too, because we've kind of just seen how having that commonality can galvanize so much conversation. And is ultimately when you meet somebody with similar life experience as there's just sort of a mutual understanding that's really valuable. So maybe seeking out those groups as well can be a good way.
I feel like a major theme that we've talked about tonight is community and really building on, a support group to propel yourself in that search and feel supported throughout it. Hoi Han, I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your organization and how you work with adoptees and help adoptees in their journeys.
Sure. So, well, essentially what you saw in Found is what we do and how we help adoptees. So what we do typically in a structured and practical manner is, after the adoptees have reached out to us and we've had some conversations and they've shared with us what they're expecting and what they have. So when it comes to the more practical research work, what we do in China is, so first of all, we typically start with that lower threshold activity that I mentioned. So checking with Chinese DNA databases. And secondly, we tend to, and that's to see if there would be a match with a second or third cousin. Then typically that doesn't, well, in a majority of cases, that does not lead to a second or third cousin match. So what we do then as a second step is social media ads. So we mostly on TikTok and GMT20221018. It's a different video platform. So we post ads. Videos tend to work especially well because they're just more direct and emotional, and they tend to grab more attention rather than, whereas 5 years ago, or even especially 10 years ago when we started, things were still more like hard copy posters on lampposts and in the villages themselves. Right now, of course, everything is much more online, and that does apply to birth parents too, and just general people in China, and how you can grab the attention of potentially relevant people to help with your search. So social media ads is the second step. Then the third step, and that is then up to the adoptee, typically if they want to continue, and because if it hasn't led to anything, or if there are some clues that came out of the ad campaigns, that's when the research starts. And that research could be following up on comments and telephone calls, or actually visiting an orphanage or anybody that gave a clue, talking to them face to face. So that's the desk and the field research part. And then the last part is really, if we have found anybody who put their hands up and might be a birth parent, then we verify that through DNA. And that last step is obviously, that's where the proof comes in. And we then work with those birth parents to take a DNA test in China. So there are two key databases in China that we use, companies, 23moFong and WeGene. And we work with birth parents to take that test, and then we upload it onto GEPmatch to see if there's a match then with the adoptee, who typically would have already taken a 23andMe or maybe Ancestry DNA test, and then GEPmatch combines those, matches those. And we have in China, we have our research team is 8 people. And yeah, they are trained, like Liu trained to do this type of research. So they're typically sociologists, anthropologists, and historians by background, educational background. And they are, what is especially important, I think, with this research, if it happens on the ground, is that you have local people who understand the local culture. So not only speak the local dialect, but just know how to speak with people, because that's almost an art form, or between science and art in itself, just knowing how to address certain questions and how to address certain people, how to navigate the sensitivities involved. And yeah, that's why our researchers are mostly locals and then trained in interviewing. And if we don't have any locals that are actually on staff, then we tend to work with freelancers who are from the particular region.
May not be completely directly related, but over the past several years, that China has gone from a one-child policy to a two-child policy to a three-child policy. Has that in any way impacted birth? Are people just more open to? I know it's not completely the same, but has that impacted ability to search in any way of people being, I guess, changing mindsets or something?
I would say so. I would say the short answer is no. Changing mindsets, I think there are a lot of directions we can go, but in terms of just finding birth parents, that topic, the key issue is of course finding them, but from the birth parent side, the key issue that they're struggling with is very often one of severe, the most intense guilt that you can imagine, and shame, and it's just those types of personal feelings and doubt of, oh, what have I done, and now if I hope I didn't destroy my baby's life, and those are such intensely deep personal issues. They're not impacted by whether people can now give birth to two children. So I wouldn't, and that is one of the key obstacles that we need to overcome, right? To build trust and to find them and to overcome those obstacles. So I think from a search point of view, no, I wouldn't say it has an impact. Yeah, okay, let's leave it there.
I have been curious though, and we felt it a little bit, maybe just anecdotally from the making of our film, is because as it relates to China, so much of the adoption happened in this span of time, right? And
yeah,
in a way, in thinking about all the adoptees from that generation coming of age now and being able to, like Lily, Sadie, and Chloe, make their own connections, make their own decisions as to what their journey wants to be like, be more sort of proactive in taking action. And, of course, I think what Hui Han's talking about from the birth parent side is still a reality, but I do think that, I don't know, I've wondered that because these adoptees have come of age and been able to almost strengthen numbers now, talk about it from their perspective, and also sort of seek out some of these avenues, that there is just more activity because of that. And certainly the potential birth parents that we encountered through the making of the film, yes, of course, we're dealing with all these massive, complicated, emotional, these feelings, but at the same time, that desire to also kind of make those connections and search for answers were super strong as well. And so, maybe it takes a starting point from one side, but it felt kind of hopeful that way, at least, just in terms of just now there's sort of a generation of adoptees coming up together and being able to sort of share their feelings and network and resources that way. And just from the making of the film too, it felt a little bit easier to be able to talk about some of these topics than before, where it was just entirely taboo, and we probably would have found a lot more obstacles against us, in trying to film in China and deal with, some of these issues. So it's I guess what I'm saying, it's not entirely changed, but
yeah,
some of these
no, I do
little
agree with you,
things
Anita.
kind of
Yeah, if you look at it
yeah.
from, sorry, Tom. No, I just want to say that I do agree with that, just because it's sort of, I guess, because we stepped out of the one-child policy, that it is more, yeah, you can, once you're outside of a concept, it's easier to sort of look back in, and you're in a more open environment. So no, I definitely agree with that. A counter to that, though, is that unfortunately, the current political environment has again maybe gone to a place that is more sensitive, and looking at, or at least digging up sensitive issues from the past and publicizing them is at the moment, you need to be just doing your thing under the radar is still fine. Doing like research and these types of research projects is fine, but in terms of making it known on a wider public level, unfortunately, and I think that's the merits being addressed to at this point in time. Things are, you just really need to know how to navigate and what you can sort of say publicly and whatnot in China. So it's just more cautiousness is recommended.
I had wondered too, like with, the privacy and wanting, birth parents are still feeling guilt and shame, and I guess the political nature as well. Like, are you finding that it's difficult for birth parents to give DNA, or are people willing to do that?
I would say the difficulty with DNA and birth parents willing to work with you, that is less to do with the politicals. That's more personal, sort of whether they trust you as a research partner, whether they believe you, and whether they one because most of them don't really know about DNA. So after you have explained to them how the process works, whether they're just personally willing to go along with it, I think that's more, again, a personal and a credibility issue. In terms of, I think the political issue has more of an impact on how we conduct searches. So we wouldn't really scream from the rooftops, oh, we were looking for these parents, and it's just all more discreet than it might have been otherwise.
Do you think China's going to have like a reckoning about this at some point? Like, do you think this is going to have to bubble over and become a big societal conversation? Or do you think it's probably just because of the politics and personal feelings, like always going to stay on the radar, or at least, or maybe like the next 10, 20 years? Do you think that?
Ooh. Well, that's a tough one, because it's just, there are political decisions being made, but there's also personal decision being made, and it's also to do with socioeconomics. So when you say reckoning, I think there's maybe reckoning on some levels, but I would I find it hard to imagine what a full-blown reckoning would look like in the first place, because it's just so many different levels at play. What kind of reckoning would you be thinking?
I guess maybe reckoning is not the right word, but just like a public acknowledgement of like, this happened and this really impacted people, like not just the adoptees but birth parents, instead of just being like, we're not really going to talk about it, or just having that shame. There's like, because I remember watching a documentary, Twinsters, and they were both adopted from South Korea. And what I found so fascinating was that the Korean government or something had this big adoptee conference every like 3 to 5 years, where it kind of seemed like they were just, I'm not Korean, I don't know anything about Korea, but it seemed like they were just more willing to like acknowledge that it was a thing and that it really impacted people, bringing people back into the culture and stuff. Like, reckoning's not the right word, but just acknowledging it more openly and like actually having a discussion about it on a wider societal
level. I don't have high hopes for the next few years. If you look at sort of the trajectory that China's been on, let's just take the last 100 years. And if you then ask from I guess maybe more Americans' point of view, to what extent has reckoning happened, and or open acknowledgement of rights and wrongs and all of that, I think there's still quite a gap between how, maybe people in the West would like to see a reckoning or an open acknowledgement, an open assessment, a fair analysis of what has happened. than what would take place in China. Yeah, I wouldn't see that happening. Having said that, I mean, the fact that there was a one-child policy, the fact that it had an impact on every element of society, that is not in dispute in itself. The fact that there have been issues, controversies with particular orphanages, that has been publicized and written about by Chinese state media too. So there are different things that are in the open and acknowledged, but it's a different question then to what extent do you then dig and keep digging and analyzing and self-analyzing as a country. That's another step that I think won't be happening in the next couple of years.
I think also kind of, I guess, from whenever I went to China, that's something that I realized that's like very different with cultural stuff is like in America, we are so ahead with technology. And I think honestly, with all the DNA tests coming out, like there have been so many more documentaries like about like finding biological parents and like siblings and all that stuff. But when in China, one of the things that like I see is that like technology really isn't like as big as it is in America. So we're in a sense, I don't want to say like it's like more of like a different development. And I feel like it's also different based off of like society and how like generations like develop, I guess, and like the social norms and the trends. And I think that's also where it can like differentiate, where in China it might not be like as big of a thing with televised things in America, if that makes sense. I really hope that makes sense.
Sorry for asking such a, I guess I'm American, obviously, and I feel like here we're always digging up stuff and always reanalyzing everything. So it's a very American perspective. Mara, do you want to ask the last question?
Yeah, I know we need to wrap up. We're getting to the end of our time here. I know we talked a lot about 23andMe and how that's a great first step, but in terms of searching, I know there are a lot of resources out there. Obviously, My China Roots is a great organization and a great resource, but if you all could talk about kind of how to find searchers, how to vet organizations, and kind of talk about what to look for when it comes to legitimacy.
I'm gonna leave that to them three. I feel like you guys would be really great at that answer.
All I can say is we followed Anita Gao, found an amazing group of our Chinese crew, we called them, and they did a lot of research on the ground to figure out the best approach. And they were the ones who said, you really need to work with this amazing group, My China Roots, who had this incredible personal story involved in this. And honestly, we read lots of reviews online of the people that they had helped and all over the world. And that was really how we started, and we found them. And then when we felt comfortable introducing them to the families and making that an option.
Well, we do what we do because we care. So I do want to, there are a lot of other institutions that do wonderful work. There's, for instance, Cassidy's Chongqing Roots of Love, Aaron's institution. There's Brian Stoy's institution. There are a lot of people that really, with all the best of intentions, try to help adoptees. So my suggestion is keep an open mind. Do your research yourself. See who you feel comfortable with working with. Talk to them personally. And just see who you feel comfortable with. Obviously, ask them about their methodology. Ask them about pricing too. Just ask them about everything. But really get them on a call because there's nothing as personal as this type of search. So you need to feel comfortable with them. Ask around on all the online platforms who people have good experiences with, and I would say this is really part of the preparation work that we were talking about at the beginning too. Just because when you talk to different institutions, it makes you think through, okay, if I want to partner with these people, how will that go? And it just allows you to imagine certain steps in that research journey. And that's just really important, I think, for adoptees themselves too. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Missy, if you want to wrap it up.
Yeah, what a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad I got to sit and wonder at it all. Thank you all so much for your expertise and your lived experience. I'm not actually part of the adoption community. I just am an adoption professional, and I will never tire of, like, I'll get emotional about it, just how resilient and vulnerable adoptees can be, and how their identity is so unique and big, and their ability to kind of invite others into it. I feel very honored every time I get to be in presence of it. So I thank you. Thank you for your talents and treasures and time. And I know this is going to be such a big service to our Barker community and our adoption community at large. So, so much gratitude for you all.
Thank you all for having us. Truly, it
Thank
means
you.
so much.
Thank you.
You.